Good evening, everybody. Good to everybody. I hope people are going to be hopping on soon. We'll give them a couple of minutes yet. We are live. I'm Stephanie Brown, founder of Intelligent Construction Opportunities. And I do these live streams so both construction professionals and software providers can exchange information and insights concerning the way technology is used today on job sites. I have done this because I believe there's gaps between how construction software is sometimes designed and the actual practicalities of using these automations alongside the actual work of the building. So as people come on and they see us and have taken their time tonight, by all means, leave your comments, and we would like to engage and interact with you in any way. So we'll give it a couple of minutes yet. I've got our two guests here, Justin Johnson and David Cheung from Software One. And yeah, guys, we're just going to wait a minute until more people hop on, and we'll take it from there. So I'm curious, just between us, for carbon emissions, was this something that was decided by the company broadly, or is it something that you saw clients wanting and therefore it became a thing?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a buzzword is, carbon sustainability. As a global company that stems out of the European market, they're a little bit further ahead in terms of the regulations, in terms of what's required in construction. So that's where this software is stemming from. So, they're already a little bit more advanced than we are here over in North America, where they're actually already being required as a prerequisite to even bid on government work, depending in certain regions of Europe. So sustainability has already been, something I think everyone in the industry has been aware of, but how to actually measure that and report on it is always challenging. So I think it's something that as we move to the future, we're going to see more and more of. And, now that we have this ability to capture data on the cloud, we can also capture not only our typical data like cost data, schedule data, but also sustainability data is very key moving forward for this industry.
Also in some countries, they have the timeline to have the compliance requirements. So that's why really hot topics for our clients looking for this kind of solutions.
When you travel, because the both of you travel so much, have you experienced in your travels, preparations that you didn't have to consider before when you're traveling, even how, I don't know, what you pack or how hot the climate is or anything like that? What are your own, I think traveling can be exciting, but it can also be, with pre-COVID and post-COVID, it's, there's a whole different arc to traveling now that didn't used to be there.
Yeah, traveling is definitely different than it was before. With regards to sustainability, I don't know, like whenever you book a flight now, it always, not always, but often asks you if you want to offset your carbon impact of your travels. There's always ways that you can try and minimize your footprint as you travel as well. I think that's becoming more and more trending going forward. Like, for example, I know that our colleagues in Europe who travel, they travel a lot more by train now as opposed to by air. That's a big trend that's kind of picking up in Germany specifically. But yeah, it's good to get back and travel and see people in person for sure, Stephanie, after all those years of COVID.
I bet. All right. Well, I think we're going to jump in. And again, reminding everybody that we're here to talk about carbon emissions in construction and how they relate to certain technology and how that technology can help those to lower those emissions throughout the value chain in construction. So my guests tonight are Justin Johnson and David Cheung from the Toronto office here in Canada of Software One. RIB Software, which is I'd say the bones of M2, the software that they represent, has partnered with Software One to be its global distributor and delivery partner for RIB's M2 Construction Cloud platform. And M2, as I just said, is the platform that both Justin and David are business developers for. They provide their worldwide clients with the knowledge, the capabilities, and the values of the M2 platform. So good evening, Justin and David, and thank you so much for making the time and working through the details that we worked on to, make sure that we are going to have a holistic presentation this evening. So
yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're very welcome. So can you, we'll start with Justin, but can you tell the audience, Justin, a little bit about yourself and what your role is with Software One and some of the work that you do day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role is a consultant, oftentimes called pre-sales consultant if I were to work somewhere else. So essentially my job is to work with clients and understand what their processes are, their perspective and how they fit into the construction industry, and then work to provide a solution that works for them. We're not trying to put a peg into a square hole, that old analogy. We're trying to make something that's actually flexible and works for that specific company. So I have a background in civil engineering. I spent about 10 years working in the field on site as either a project coordinator and then a project manager as well. So I understand in depth the perspective of the people who actually have the boots on the ground. And now I have the opportunity to work on the software side to provide solutions that actually resonate and work with how things actually come together in reality in the field.
And so what did you do in the field or in construction when you came out of school?
Yeah, so I spent about half of my time after I graduated working on the west coast of Canada, doing all sorts of capital projects for the utility provider for the province, which was BC Hydro. So that was managing a lot of smaller capital projects. And then I moved to Toronto, where I was responsible for a large renovation of a 5-story building downtown Toronto, College and Bathurst, for anyone familiar with the streets of downtown there. And basically did everything you can imagine to that building in terms of gutting it, underpinning it, adding a floor to it. And that was a project I was involved in right from purchasing the property all the way through the design, construction, close out, and eventually occupying that building as well. So, it was a really good project for me to get to see all the different aspects of the life cycle of a project. And now I've been with Software One here for just over 2 years.
Very good. And David, what about you? What's your story?
Thank you, Stephanie. My name is David Cheung, and I'm from Software One Canada. I'm based in Toronto, and I've been working with Software One for almost 2 years. So my company, Software One, actually is the leading global provider for end-to-end enterprise systems and cloud technology with over 30 years experience. And our headquarters is based in Austria. And we are one of the leading Microsoft Azure solution provider globally. So I'm responsible for the business development for a product called M2 Construction Cloud from a company called RIB. So the Software One is the global distributors of M2 products for RIB. So I have over 35 years experience for selling enterprise consultative selling enterprise system to different industry such as manufacturing and architectural engineering and consulting industry. For my past 10 years, I'm focusing in selling connected technology of enterprise project management systems in AEC industry. So I'm lucky that I have involved in some of the major projects across the world in the infrastructure, transportation, the commercial and residentials, and oil and gas, etc. So for more detail about my background, please feel free to visit my LinkedIn, and you will know more about myself. Yeah.
And you named a lot of a lot of industry. Did you have one that you favored more than another, David?
Yes, one of my favorite project is from my hometown, Hong Kong, is a big mega project called West Kowloon Cultural District Project, because this is one of the landmark project of in Hong Kong for building the multiple culture complex. It's very complex project with different packages, so it involves so many parties. So it's one of the most complex project I come across, and also another good project in Macau. So it's the biggest project I ever came is Venetian Macau. So it's so many users we need to deal with, and the process is so complex. So it's one of another project I never forget. After this project, I have connected to many people, and these people spread all over the world in different kind of projects, and we are still connected. So these two projects are one of my key projects. I still uh, in my memory, yeah, all the time.
So like in all things, it's about the relationships and the people that you meet and the people that you work with.
And also the complexity of the projects. Yeah.
You like the complexity. So, when you say complexity, what does that mean to you? Is it the challenges in construction? I mean, there's so many that there are. What specifically about complexity do you like?
It definitely is the challenges, especially for the traditional culture of construction projects, when we are trying to leverage technology for these important projects. Uh, Not all the parties or people involved in the projects will understand the value of the technology, and we may encounter some pushbacks. So it is challenge when how we can really adopt technology efficiently and effectively to ensure all the people will use the system and technology at different stages. Because if yeah,
Digital adoption is certainly,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah, any missing pieces of information will cost you a lot of unnecessary works, right? Which have impacted time and the cost of the projects. So imagine if some unnecessary work in the Venetian Macau casino project and delay, say, 1 week for the openings, you know how much how much revenue they're going to lose, right?
Yes.
And just to reiterate the point David's making, so he's mentioned end to end, but just to reiterate what that means, so all the way from design, all the way through to facilities management, everything that needs to be done in between, the platform covers in a connected way. So everything from scheduling, estimating, project management, document management, procurement, site management, all those things are covered in a single platform where we can really have an integrated solution. So you're not using one tool and trying to figure out where the data is. Everything's connected together here to help you better manage the whole construction process.
Okay, well, that's really good to know, because I mean that is for sure a heavy lift. I
Mhm.
want to get into a little bit about M2 and what modules you would say are typically used by clients, and then we're going to dive deeper into the carbon emissions piece.
Yeah,
Mhm.
of course, definitely. So, as Justin just mentioned, you can see the big circle on the slide. So basically, we cover all the data, people, and processes during the project development cycle at every stages, as early as planning stages to design stage, till construction stage upon completions, which involve all kinds of people, different parties, and different datas. So for the next slide, you can see that the basic architecture of M2 Construction Cloud, we manage, as I mentioned, any kinds of data, documents, drawings, and also we have a sophisticated workflow management to handle all kinds of processes during the project development cycle, and also manage all the business partners such as the external consultants, architects, contractors or subtrades, and also the related resource that we're going to arrange during the project development cycle. And we also have the features and functions for the different stages, such as how we can manage the BIM models, how we can do the estimating, do the quantity takeoff, create a schedule, and also we can create a 5D BIM simulation because we can capture the BIM models with the related schedule, time, and cost informations. And also we can handle tendering, biddings, and for the project management activities, along with the project monitoring, procurements, quality and safety, etc. On top of these, we also have the business intelligence and AI capabilities to create the real-time dashboards and reports according to the requirements of our clients. So this is the basic architecture of M2 Construction Cloud. We are helping clients. So next slide, Justin.
Yes.
Yeah. So the most common benefits or feature and function, as I just mentioned, with the 5D beam simulations. So you can see on the screen, uh, no project is perfect in the world, as we all understand, right? If something happened during the, for example, construction stage, some variations or change orders, so we can have this kind of 5D simulation to compare the planned stage and the actual current stage, and we can see if something happened or change happened or variation happened, you can see the impact to the time and the cost, and also we can evaluate the different options to compare to handle this kind of changes. So in the past, our clients may not be able to be so visible. Yep.
Yeah. I want to get into that, but I also want to make sure that we're, you know,
Yep.
talking about how the carbon emissions. So if we
Mhm.
could just sort of segue a
Yes.
little bit out of here for a minute,
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
and
No problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sort of
Yep.
go into, why are carbon emissions the problem, and we kind of want to understand how much carbon does the construction industry emit
Yeah.
right now in terms of, um, you know,
Okay. Yep.
why
Sure.
why is this all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Well, it's not all of a sudden. I mean, certainly it's been
Yep.
coming along, but in North America, we've been slower to adapt to it.
Mm,
Certainly, Europeans have been ahead of this. But we want to kind of get into how does carbon affect us
yeah.
based on how the construction industry, is somewhat responsible for those emissions.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think this slide does a good job of kind of summarizing some of those key figures, Stephanie. So the one I've highlighted in green here is that 38%, so over a third of all the carbon that's emitted in the world comes from the construction industry. So that's if you think about the whole life cycle of construction. So you're thinking about the materials that go into whatever you're building, and you're also thinking about the operations of delivering those materials to site, what happens afterwards, demolition. It's a full life cycle analysis, and it's over a third of the global CO2 emissions. So it is a very large aspect of the overall emissions of what we're doing on this planet together. If you further break down that 38% of this building and construction sector carbon, you want to see where that actually comes from. You can see here that there's, in blue in the top of the screen there's the transportation, which is 23%. There's the industry, 32%. And you see on the right-hand side, the red and the gray, those are what comes from actually the building construction sector. So again, over a third comes from building construction sector. And if we look at that 38%, and if we look at the red there, so in red is about 28% of the building use phase. So that's if you think about an actual building, after we've constructed something, we want to heat the building, we want to cool the building, those sort of emissions from the actual building after it's constructed is 28%. But there's kind of this hidden 10% of the carbon emissions that's in that gray color there, and that's from the building construction and material. And that's something that's kind of been forgotten about where everyone thinks about emissions in terms of burning coal to heat a building, but people often don't think about the materials themselves. So if you're putting concrete in a building, or if you're putting a mass timber building together, those are two very different building materials that have two very different carbon outputs that are required to produce those materials. So that's where we come up with this concept of, we call that the embodied carbon. So that 10% there in gray is what we refer to as the embodied carbon. And that's where we're kind of able to help companies take the next step and not only think about the emissions from when the building's in operation, but also what goes into the actual construction of the building or other asset that's being constructed.
And so what is the benefit if a company is going to look at this and go, yep, we get it, our building materials emit these amount of emissions and so on. Mm-hmm. If assuming these are government mandated legalities, I'll say, that are being bought into the whole construction contract.
Yes.
What is going to drive a contractor? What's the benefit to them to start to be aware of this data? Forget about M2 for a minute.
Yes. Yeah.
General.
Yeah. So I think in general, it's important, obviously for the environment as a whole. But if you're a construction company, that's nice, but ultimately you have to make money, right? Your bottom line is most important. So how is this going to affect your bottom line? I think in two ways. First, it's going to help you win more work, because not only are we seeing more and more government restrictions and regulations on what they want to see when it's a government funded project, but also there's a lot of larger companies now where they're publicly traded and they have an ESG score. So for them to be a company that can be listed on the stock exchange with a good ESG score, that people want to invest money in that company, they have to do reporting on things like this to prove that they're actually being sustainable. So I think the first thing is just to win work and be able to show that you're a sustainable company. And that can have a trickle-down effect to other things in your organization, such as a lot of the younger workforce now values that a lot. So it's easier to attract and retain employees. Obviously, it's healthier for the actual workers on site if, the emissions being emitted, instead of using gas-powered machinery, maybe you're using some more electric machinery that's not spitting those fumes out in confined spaces. So there's beyond just the ability to win more work, there's a lot of other secondary aspects as well that are beneficial to.
So let's kind of get a little bit of real case here. So you have contractors and building owners approaching you for this kind of a thing, or
yeah.
So
one specific recent example I can think of is there is a hospital project where there is different consortiums bidding on trying to win that work. And one of the metrics that they were judged against was their ability to demonstrate how they were going to achieve sustainability targets. And because it is a publicly funded project, as hospitals are, that was something that they really wanted to look at. And actually the customer that we helped support with our technology to win that work made use of the visual aids of the 6D, so that they could actually not just write in a paragraph, yes, we will do our best to achieve sustainability. They actually were able to produce a figure and show that to the evaluation team. So it really helped them a lot in winning that top-notch score in terms of demonstrating their ability to meet whatever the sustainability targets were on that project.
Also, I understand that the U.S. government provides tax incentives to companies taking sustainability initiatives. How much of would you say the circular economy, what parts of the circular economy would you say that what you do fits into? Is it decreasing resource extraction? Is it a recycling and remanufacture? Like, what exactly happens on the job site as a result of identifying this data and allowing people to then, or managers of that site, be able to control it?
Yeah, so I think it's a number of things. So I just came to this slide here, Stephanie. So it's you have to think about emissions from an entire life cycle perspective. So I think, by having everybody work together in a collaborative platform, there's the obvious benefit of being able to select the right materials and see directly what the impact is of selecting different materials. You don't have to sort of guess and just think, okay, this sounds good, let's do that. You can actually get real data to see what the impact is. Secondly, because everyone's collaborating on this platform together, we're actually reducing a lot of the rework and a lot of the waste on site, because everyone's better able to understand, what the sequencing is of the job, what exactly their scope of work is, how they tie into the other people working on the job. So not only can we help people make better decisions on the design end in terms of what materials and what sequencing and what to design, but also during construction, we can have better collaboration, so that we can reduce a lot of the rework that's required and a lot of the wasted material on site as well.
Do you take into lean practices at all when you are considering how this repurposing and waste and all of that is considered within your system? Or is it, if somebody practices lean, for example, that would sit outside of it? Because what I'm thinking is, I'm looking at these things, and yes, you can reduce that amount of rework, but then it needs, all the more management. You've bought in perhaps different materials that certain trades are not as accustomed to using. Is there a heavy lift here in terms of retraining or managing to make sure the carbon?
I definitely think the first time that you transition to anything new, there's going to be a bit of a transition period. But I can say, I give the analogy, like for my days working in the field. Some people didn't believe in going to a meeting because they already knew what they needed. They already thought they knew what they needed to do. But just taking that hour, half an hour, or even 10 minutes at the beginning of the day to sit down and talk to the other trades to see, what are you doing today? What am I doing today? Although it feels like wasted time of just sitting there talking, that 10 minutes you spend talking at the beginning of the day will actually probably save you a few hours in the long run. So I see this as a similar thing where, yes, it does take a little bit more planning up front. You do have to get ramped up initially, but then once you have a system in place that is truly collaborative like this, it saves you a lot of time in the long run.
So as far as explaining how your system helps contractors and building owners, instead of I appreciate the slides, but what are some things that they come to you wanting, and how do you actually, when you onboard them, how are they tactically using your system to help them lower those emissions on their builds and on their sites?
Yeah, so I think everybody's unique, first of all. So there's not a one size fits all solution. But for example, we have a cost estimating solution called CostX. So it may be that someone's never heard of our company before, and that's fine. We can integrate different solutions they're already using instead of forcing them to transition all over to our platform all at once. Or if someone is already using something like our estimating solution, CostX, we can actually just tack on the sustainability component to that tool, because if you're already calculating quantities already to produce your estimate, what we do is we connect that data to an online database that has the carbon emissions data, so that they're able to automatically, from their estimate, produce a simulation and all types of different graphics to visualize their sustainability data from the estimate. So I'd say there's different solutions for different people depending on what tools they're currently using, what their current processes are in place, sort of where their goals are, where they want to take it, and then also, what type of work do they do, how large of a company they are. So there's a lot of different things to consider in terms of, finding a fit for each company.
Are there environmental databases that you have access to and that you offer as a part of your package that would therefore then really ramp up their knowledge to know what they're doing? Because I'm assuming that, you must have clients that, are new to all of this kind of idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, how do you start to feed the emissions data to even evaluate how they might change, the building materials, for example, that they may use on some average projects?
Yeah, so we actually make use of a database called EC3. It's actually a free online database that anyone can access. But what we do differently than just going onto a website and pulling data is we connect all this data together with the rest of our platform. So as I was saying earlier, if you do a quantity takeoff or something to produce, to produce quantities that you're eventually going to put into your estimate, those quantities we have the system set up so it'll automatically give you an output of the carbon output of that quantity of whatever you just took off as well. So we're making use of a free online database. Again, it's called EC3. But what we're doing that's unique is we're integrating that directly into the solution that has the schedule and estimate and model or drawings in it as well, to create a real connected ecosystem of how everything ties together and how you can see different scenarios, track things throughout the project to see, okay, how much material did we actually use versus what we thought we were going to use, and everything's connected. You don't have to keep going back to a database and manually doing things. It's a truly connected way of managing a project.
So that's a really good segue then, actually. So how is that data actually lifted from the site? Give me an example of a couple of job roles on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Is this an app that's on their iPad or their mobile device? How is this consumed off the site and then gotten into the system?
Yeah, so as the slide's showing, it's it can be anybody that's interacting with this data, and we have both a web application as well as a mobile app. And what you can do is you can control which users or which set of users can access and edit and delete certain types of data. So, for example, maybe there's an estimator who's actually doing the work of building the quantity takeoff to produce his quantities for his estimate. But then it's perhaps a different person on site who's then making use of that same data to then report progress on site, to report things such as material waste. So that, but the idea is that they're not working in different tools and having to transfer data and lose data that way. Everyone's interacting with the same pool of data, but the way that they see that pool is customized specifically for what they're interested in. So they're not overwhelmed with all this other information that doesn't relate to them. They're only seeing the data that they really care about and need to interact with on a daily basis.
Okay, so I'm gonna challenge you a bit. So you've got a fleets of contracted dump trucks coming in and out of the site, taking out doing the excavation part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
So what role is there that is finding and evaluating how much emissions are being let out by those dump trucks as they idle, waiting for their turn to go back into the pit and take out their particular load of soil?
Yeah, so it would be in that specific case, I guess you would have someone on site, maybe a site superintendent or project coordinator, who could collect that data on site. They'd be able to put that data into the platform either through a phone or iPad or something like that, and then that data is immediately connected back to people in the office, so that they're able to see how things are trending. If there's an issue with something, They could then make a call that say that there's a bunch of trucks idling because, they were all told that they should be on site and they'd be ready for them, but maybe they're not quite ready for them. You could then communicate that back to the dispatch team to make sure that they're more appropriately scheduling the trucks to come to sites. They're not spent all that time idling.
So or a report of what was happening as opposed to a measurement of the emissions, because that's why I threw that out there, because I would think that it would be very difficult in that kind of a scenario, and yet that's a typical, transportation and that's part of the emissions. It doesn't have to be a dump truck or a dump truck. It could be, name the heavy machinery that's running perhaps when it doesn't need to be, or not efficient in how it's doing its role on the site.
So I'm just coming to this slide here, Stephanie. So not only talking about idling time, but also considering the distance to the site of those trucks is important as well. So this slide is talking about when you're in the stage of evaluating who you're going to award a contract to. So you have various subcontractors here. You have those 4 subcontractors, and typically you're always going to look at price. That's always going to be important. Maybe you're going to look at other factors such as their safety information, their past projected performance, etc. But you can also use this integrated way of evaluating vendors to add in other metrics such as distance to site. So maybe there's a concrete supplier who's a little bit cheaper, but they're driving, 200 kilometers away versus a concrete plant that's just around the corner, and they can be there right away and they're not having to emit all of that carbon to get to the site. So that this way of integrating carbon into our system isn't just through the estimate in terms of the quantities of material, but it can also be done through the procurement process when you're evaluating which subcontractors or vendors to award contracts to, and then be able to track this information not only by project, but also across a group of projects enterprise-wide.
That's very good. So this is a good segue then to sort of flip it outside of the site. So can you explain how engineers and architects would design their building from an emission standpoint as a result of having this kind of software?
Yeah, so what they can do is, again, connect the EC3 database to their design. So we're agnostic in terms of what design files can be imported into our platform. So whether it's 2D or 3D, whether it's AutoCAD and Revit, which we find are most common, or whether it's Tekla or Bentley, PDF, other types of design files, regardless of what the engineers and architects are comfortable in using, they can use our system to import those design files into the platform. And then once they're in there, we can set up the connections to EC3 so that they are able to have different dashboards and reports to visualize how their designs are going to perform in terms of the embodied carbon, and then make decisions to change materials or change the size or shape or orientation of the building as well.
Very good. Now let's go back to the site and talk about the trades, because I find in software, oftentimes they are responsible for doing the minutia and picking up the details that go into apps that they're told to download that can or cannot. And this gets back to David's whole thing he talked about at the top about the digital adoption.
Yep.
A lot of that comes from the fact that they've got actual physical work to do. They've got to get the drywall done. They've got to get those electrical panels in, on and on and on, whatever their role is in that construction site. What are the direct health benefits to those site workers by lowering the emissions? Do you find that there are construction workers that get more ill, and is it traced back to the emissions, or is there any kind of reports and documentation about that? Are you aware of that, or is that not something?
Yeah, David, do you want to take that question?
Yes, in some case, when we have some challenges, especially regarding the site people, all right, to access. So we are trying to make it very simple, make it their work less, because for the adoption will be the challenges. So we have all kinds of presetted formal templates so that they can using our apps so that they can input the relevant information quickly, easy, without any difficulties, so that they can be more efficient and effective to be handling the procedures at the site. So this is one of the key challenges that we need to overcome when we are trying to apply the technology on the site.
So you've got this case study up. This is a dashboard. Is that fair to
Yep.
say? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
If they
exactly.
have it on their phone, are they directly or indirectly responsible for capturing your, I'll say your typical or average kind of data emissions for the size of enterprise clients that you do have?
So the question is, like, the people on site, how are they
Yeah,
capturing this data?
responsible for collecting any of this emissions data that you know that the system would then consume to advise both the general contractor and the building owner?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this data that I'm showing here is from the design side, from evaluating the model and seeing, how the model performs in terms of carbon emissions. So it's been color coded by these different colors here: red for high emissions, yellow for medium, and green for low emitting materials. But in terms of where the people on site come into this, is they're going to be the ones who are actually verifying what quantities are actually being used on site. Um, for example, with concrete, perhaps this is shown as a 8-inch slab, but they maybe overpoured it just because, I don't know, maybe there's a mistake on site, or maybe there's a design change that needs to be captured as a RFI or something like that. Design, this is kind of the plan at the beginning of the project, but of course the people who are actually on site are going to be the ones who actually know what's actually happening and reporting the data that's realistic to what's in the real world.
Yeah, I've got some comments here. I've got Nishanth commenting, sharing some resources that highlight the correlation between workforce health and construction emissions would be helpful. He's provided a link. I will provide that to our audience. And just as a little segue, all of those that took the time to jump on tonight, we will be providing you with some collateral, not a whole slideshow, just some takeaway for people as far as their interests here. And Kip Ivey had jumped on as well from Faro. He and I had a good go around the last time we did this. He wants to know if there's any reality capture integrations. Is that something that you guys can address?
We have, I know, David, I think you know the most about the reality capture. I know we have done that in the past a few times. It's not something we've done extensively. But if there's another tool that's being used for reality capture, if you're referring to like drones and that type of stuff, or like the VR goggles, all that type of technology, we do have a few cases where we've implemented that. But even if you're not using something that we have specifically, you're using another tool to do any of that, we can then integrate that data and visualize it in this connected platform. So the connected platform isn't just about connecting all the data that's originated in this platform. It's about connecting all the data from this platform as well as any external tool that you're using as well. And yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I have experienced a project using a product called I2 Lens. So it's like a VR lens. So when the people go into the site, they can see the systems like we always joke like Iron Man, the Jarvis, right? We can point to the systems and then point to the models and do the site inspections, all that stuff. But all these information are connected to the backend systems. So if something happened on the models, or for example, the inspections, they can just point it out, circle it out, capture an image, and then link that information to our backend system on M2 through the lens. Yeah, it's one of example that we help our client in one of the projects.
You do have a client doing that. So speaking of different systems, what would you say are maybe the top 5 or even, perhaps 10 top integrations that M2 tends to integrate with? I mean, if
Yeah.
you're this environmental data, obviously there's a lot of the open APIs, yeah?
Yes, yeah, we do have an open API. In terms of integrations, a very common one is on the scheduling side with either Microsoft Project or Primavera P6. We do have our own scheduling module that comes with the platform, but we find that when it comes to scheduling, MS Project and P6 are very popular. So we allow people to continue to use those tools they're already comfortable with using, and then integrate that data into the system so it can all be visualized in here. I'd say another one would be on the financial ERP side. So connecting all of the procurement processes that we can do in this platform into either like SAP or Microsoft Dynamics or NetSuite or others, so that you have a connection with your financial system. David, help me out here. What are a few other common integrations we do?
Actually, if some people may aware the recent Deloitte studies of the information technology, the major player invested in construction industry with the connected technologies. What we are talking about today, carbon emission control, the database, is all because of the connected information throughout the process, right? So we have all kinds of even not only the system like SAP or Microsoft Dynamics, or even the tools like Autodesk Revit for the CAD tools, or even some of the estimating software, or even the procurement software. We can all connect it. But the key value proposition is to provide the single truth of data for our client to making the right decisions when something happened, as I mentioned earlier. So carbon emission is one of the key criteria, right? We are facing the challenge, but a lot more challenges, right? Along different stages. So the key value proposition of M2 is the connected technology. So no more silos. Yeah.
So I'm curious then. So say supposing you have a prospect that comes to you, and we're gonna start winding down, but this is kind of how I want to summarize this tonight. This has been a lot of information, a lot of kind of data.
Yep.
We want to be able to sort of summarize where does this all lead to. So if you've got a client that wants to, because they want to win more bids, because that's part of the carrot and the stick, as far as reducing these emissions, how would you recommend a contractor of a more medium size, perhaps not as large as some of your enterprise clients, but that want to build out an emissions reduction strategy? What modules in software one and M2 would you start with to start to plug in that data that you've referred to, that environmental data? How would you recommend they start to build it out? And I'm saying slowly as opposed to taking the whole 9 yards of the system.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, is that you don't have to, just have one process you're doing now, throw it all out the window, and tomorrow you're using M2 for everything. That's not what we want. We want to really sit down with each individual customer, understand what their processes are right now, understand what tools they're using right now, and then see how we can slowly implement some of these sustainability modules into their operations. So whether that's 2 phases, 10 phases over 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, we want to do it in baby steps and kind of add each of these modules on as like pieces of Lego, and make sure that we're not disrupting everything that you've already are used to doing, and just make it a smooth transition into being able to add this sustainability component onto what you're already doing.
Yeah, no matter you're a big enterprise or SME business, we try to help through the connected technology to help them to win more business, help them to facilitate or reduce unnecessary rework and cost, and yeah, this was one of our key mission of M2 for the industry.
Well, on that note, just one more comment that came in from Kip. He's saying 360 photos mainly he feels have direct value. So I'd be very surprised if your system is not capable of, some sort of image capture. Is that fair?
We don't actually have an image capture system, but I know there are a lot of really good solutions on the market for that. But again, once you have that data, once you have those 360 images, what are you going to do with them? How does that relate to other tasks you have to do? So that's where we come in. Is we may not be the actual tool you're using to take those 360 images, but whatever tool or device you're using to capture that data, we can then use our platform to visualize that data and then integrate that data with how it interacts with the other processes that you're trying to achieve. So yes, go ahead, David.
Yep, I think the key factors is how we can communicate with applications, such as we don't do like graphic for the modeling, right? So, but we need the BIM model to capture the information, right? We don't have a sophisticated inventory management, financial management like SAP, right? But the key is we need to connect the information to the platform, right? To be collaborated with different parties for making decisions. So I think it's a similar philosophy and ideas of Justin just mentioned.
Very good. Well, I think on that, we're going to call it. What I would say is, because not only from a carbon tracking and lowering emissions in construction is this a relevant conversation, but these are a lot of deep rabbit holes here. And as both Justin and David pointed out earlier in our presentation, I mean, not one size fits all. So integrations are going to be different, size of projects, type of projects, all things are going to be factors in how this data is obviously not just captured and what you're capturing, but what are you going to do with those outputs? And that to me is the crux of most software is, yeah, great. Now you've got the platform that is digitizing this information. What's it going to do for you 1 and 2 and 3 years down the road for why you've captured the data to begin with? So I would urge anybody who's on the call tonight that's interested in learning more to contact me at info@intelops.com. I will hook you up with Justin and David accordingly. And we will, after this, figure out what we think is some valuable information. But this is an ongoing conversation between construction professionals and any software, let alone something that's as end-to-end as M2's is. And it all comes out of the questions and what do people want to see and who saw it tonight. And I know, like, for example, Kip's got his own kind of software doing its thing. So where does that align with what M2's offering, and particularly around the subject of lowering carbon emissions? So I'd like to thank both Justin and David. There were some other cool things we wanted to talk about. We were going to talk about a Microsoft case study. We never got around to that. But we'll see whether there will be a round 2 of this. And would love to get feedback from any and all that took their time tonight to tune in. We're all ears. This is all ongoing for all of us. So again,
thanks so much for organizing this, Stephanie, and thanks for everyone who took their time to join us today. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
And on that note, everybody have a good night and hope to hear and see from you soon. Bye-bye.